A long time ago, I was working for this company and I was out of town, and we had to move a whole bunch of stuff, a bunch of heavy things from one side to another in this room. And so I was moving all this stuff, and then all of a sudden I had this like sharp twinge in my back, and it
Huh.
just my back just suddenly started hurting, and I collapsed, like fell down to my knees, and it was just like so much pain, and just like, just twitching and throbbing and stuff, and I was trying to fight it and trying to get up and everything, and just focusing on like, oh my god, this hurts so bad, and it just was getting worse and worse and worse. And of course my coworkers were like, oh my god, what's going on? And I'm like, it's my back. I just give me a minute. um and so then I thought, oh, okay, wait, I can't keep focusing on this. So I just like kind of sat there and cleared my head and kind of meditated for a while, and it started subsiding. I mean, it was still, the pain was
Mm-hmm.
still present, like, and I could feel spasming happening, but I was able to then stand up by relaxing, like completely relaxing and not worrying. Like I just kind of thought about other things and just went, just was able to get up. I ended up going back, heading back to town because there was no working through that. I definitely needed to relax, like rest, but that was like instantaneous. That it was
Huh.
the thought, like me focusing on the pain and tensing up and stuff, made the pain get much worse. And as soon as I just kind of zeroed that out, it pretty much went away. Like the pain and there was still dull uh discomfort there, but it,
Yeah.
like, yeah.
Yeah. I I've done the same with back pain specifically, and there was actually a doctor, Dr. John Sarna, if I remember correctly, wrote a book, or maybe a couple books even, about this mind over back pain. I think was actually even the title, probably.
Hmm.
Um, and he was laughed off as a quack, and eventually I came to kind of the same conclusion, even though, like, after reading the book and trying to practice some of the mindfulness, he was kind of onto something. Like, his idea was all back pain comes from the mind, which I still think is a little bullshit, right?
Yeah, I think that's
Um,
stretching it.
yeah, but what he was touching on could actually be this condition that we call long COVID.
Hmm.
It could just be uh, the body hanging, or the body and or mind hanging on to something that went wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I believe, um just from our discussion here, I feel like this effect, this long COVID, might be both physical and psychological. Like there's
Mhm.
probably elements of both in it. Um, so it's like maybe that is why it's difficult to pin down the exact cause, because it's so broad. Um, Actually, thinking of another thing, um, this is something too, that panic attacks.
Oh
Most
yeah.
people suffer from panic attacks, but it's usually, you know, from my analysis of it, it seems like it's brought on. You're in a stressful situation. Maybe it's long term stress. You're anxious and things like that, and then
Yeah.
one little thing happens, like say maybe your heart rate goes up, or you have this thought or something, and then it becomes this cycle
Yeah.
that amplifies itself, that like
Hmm.
you are now afraid, and you're like, oh my god, what's happening. Like I've had friends that thought like, oh my god, I'm having a heart attack and this and that, and it just got
Oh
worse and
yeah.
worse and worse. And then they got to the hospital, and the doctors are like, yeah, you're fine, there's nothing wrong, we can't see anything wrong. But
And
it's
that's
like
frustrating.
they had the chest pains and the
Hmm.
the,
Hmm.
the heart. It's like, and that
Yeah.
all came out of somebody's mind.
Acute anxiety. Yeah, it
Yeah.
totally. um I uh I remember about a year ago I was getting a whole lot of tests done because I had some stuff that seemed wrong with me, like a laundry list of things, right?
Hmm.
And with my history. I'm like, what if this is cancer again creeping up on me?
Mhm.
It's a tightrope walk between like being a hypochondriac and being actually like very careful about a very real threat.
Yeah.
In my case, so I
Well, I
got
think
all
that
these.
applies with a lot of things in life
Yeah,
in general.
yes, very true. But um, I I came to the conclusion after a lot of these tests said everything was fine, that everything was indeed fine, and my my brain was kind of filling in some of these symptoms.
Mhm.
But I did end up finding precancerous polyps in my colon, got those removed, and I had skin cancer, got that removed.
Mhm.
So there was stuff wrong, but it couldn't have explained all the other symptoms.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
it shows you, yeah, it can be physical. You're not crazy, but your brain is making it worse.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and yeah, you may be like, especially with your history, you could have been, your brain could have been fabricating those effects, having noticed a few things, and not like you're, subconsciously you detect a few anomalous uh, conditions or whatever, and your brain just latches onto that and fills that in with your own personal experience as like kind of a warning, perhaps.
Yeah. Um, whatever it is, I think there needs to be like in the realm of medicine, I think it would be great if there were kitchen sink microscopy style discussions like this
Mm-hmm.
that are, open source, where people can kind of, mm, bring their stories. Because here's the thing with stuff like this, most people probably never go to the doctor because they know exactly what they're going to hear. You're just stressed,
Mm-hmm.
or we can't find anything. You know,
Yeah.
eh, half the time, well, more than half the time, the doctor doesn't even check for anything. They're just
Yeah.
like, oh, this is totally just, eh. Like they
Yep.
totally like scoff at you and
Well, they
make you
they
feel
just
like an idiot. And
they just assume based on their own experience, oh, it must be this,
Mhm.
because you
But
have
it's
all
like,
the hallmarks of this particular thing, so it's that, of course.
the truth of the matter is, if you feel bad, something is wrong,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's in your brain or your body or a combination of the two. Something needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
Like there should never be a situation where somebody goes to the doctor and nothing happens.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yep, I agree. Yeah.
something like, hey, I can't help you, but let's send you over there. Like they
Sure.
might be able to help you. Like it's never that's never the case though, right? And something like this, the KSM style discussion could really like uh, open the floor for ideas to come up for things that we really should maybe investigate and research further.
Sure. Well, and I agree. And see, I think medical science, well, science in general, needs to be a little more open-minded and exploratory for ideas. Like it seems like so much more, very much now, um, scientists in general, kind of have their conclusions. Like this is how things are, and if anybody floats an idea that is contradictory or maybe you know it seems out there, they immediately dismiss it like harshly. It's not a like, oh well, maybe we'll look into that. It's like they just basically poo-poo the person,
Right.
and the idea, and just, oh, that's complete bullshit. But it's history is full of examples of that exact thing happening, where a person has this novel concept or idea, um, and they get completely dismissed by the scientific community, and then it turns out that person was totally right. Like it happens over and
Oh yeah.
over and over again, and it's like, why is that happening? I thought science was not about being like a hard ass and just like, oh, yep, this is the way it is. It's never going to change. We know everything. Like that's not how it ought to be.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it comes down to money.
True.
Well, a lot of times
Well,
it comes
yeah.
down to money, but those are the cases where discussion, like this discussion is free.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, apart from a person's time, which of course has its value and stuff, but this is valuable.
Absolutely.
And like there's a reward in and of itself in deep sink diving. and just the potential for new ideas and stuff. Because this is honestly, like, I feel like before this episode, I thought I was like really onto something, like, oh, maybe it's just any old virus or whatever, but now it's kind of gone into like stress, or maybe just even um the mind itself just kind of creating something real. And when people hear that, right, like, we're all conditioned to think like, oh, people just think we're crazy, right?
Yeah.
And like, no, like, you're really hurt. You're really in pain. Like, we've all done this. I wonder if this phenomenon is something that everybody gets to some degree. Like,
I think it is. Yeah.
have you ever been sick or stressed out and had just felt that it took a really long time to bounce back from?
Sure. That's definitely happened.
Yeah.
And I've had weird things given certain circumstances in my life, that are stressful, where I've felt ill, or I felt like something's wrong, or pain, or random things that, as soon as that stressful situation was gone, those things just immediately disappeared.
Yeah.
And
what if a psychosomatic condition is just one of these, like, witch doctor sort of things that we still hang on to, where we're like, well, we don't know what's really wrong, we'll just wave our hands and say it's all in the mind.
yeah.
But I mean, yes and no. Like, the mind is doing something, and we even know this to be a fact.
Yeah.
The mind can affect physiology.
Absolutely.
So why do we still have this stigma that, like, unexplainable pain and stuff like that is something that's just like, it's in the mind, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
why does that make it not a big deal? It's still real pain.
Well, and like the placebo effect is something like, and I think, like, so what if, as a course, depending on the circumstances, obviously, but through the course of attempting to treat a disease or some malady of some sort, we start with a therapeutic process that doesn't involve any medicine or surgery, and instead begins with some kind of psychological approach, like you said, witch doctors, right? People in places where that's still a thing, they genuinely believe that the witch doctor doing all the stuff and pulling the poisons out of your body and saying the magic words and doing the little dance and stuff, they believe that heals people. And maybe it does in certain situations,
and
like
maybe it does the opposite in certain situations.
it could, but it's like, this is worthy of study, I think.
Yeah.
Because what if we could have some
study? There was a study on prayer and whether or not it, I know we've talked about this before, but like, for anyone that hasn't caught that episode, there was a study that checked whether or not prayer was effective in healing people.
Yeah.
And the study found that in certain cases, actually, it does quite the opposite, because it makes in the brain this feeling like, oh shit, they're praying for me, I must be worse than I thought. And then your body follows suit, right?
Well, yeah, and I think it could also have a positive effect too. If you have a
Of
community
course. Yeah.
rallying around you and you feel loved and you feel like
Mhm.
this is going to help, then you're more inclined to let go of whatever it is that's bringing this on.
Yeah.
But like
But
you
I think
said,
that happens when you're in the same wavelength. Like,
yep,
you're bad off, and other people are like, oh yeah, you're bad off, I'm gonna pray for you.
yep,
Like, then you're not like being duped by your brain into thinking one way or another, right?
mm-hmm.
Well, you might be duped into thinking you're feeling better.
Mm-hmm. Which might
'Cause
actually make you better if the cause of your problem
maybe,
is
yeah,
psychologically based.
there are cases of cancer just kind of disappearing.
Yeah. Well, and maybe, stress might accelerate cancerous growth in certain situations. You never know.
Yep.
Well, and like you were saying though, like the people praying for you and how you're like, oh my God, I must be bad off. I have an anecdote about that. Like, so back in middle school, well, throughout my life, I've always gotten migraines and stuff like that, occasionally. And so this one particular day back in middle school, my friend was over, like we had like a weekend hanging out overnight kind of thing. And we were up really late and I woke up and my head was kind of not feeling right. Like kind of it was that pre-migraine feel that if you've ever had migraines, you might know what that
Yeah.
is. And so, um, we decided to go out and get some snacks or whatever. So we're walking around. It's like a hot summer day, um, walking around and stuff. And we went into the Safeway and grabbed some sodas and some candy and stuff. And we're sitting on the curb there, and I'm still feeling a little like not really so right. And my friend looks over at me. And he's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, What do you mean?" And he's like, You look really pale and kind of sweaty. Are you sure you're okay?" And suddenly, like, I just suddenly felt like ass. Like my head started
Right.
throbbing and I felt all dizzy and felt nauseous and stuff. And then a migraine pretty much like hit me at that point. And we
Yeah.
had to walk home and I just like laid in bed and my friend, like his mom came and picked him up and stuff. But like that's all it took. And I found too, like I will end up with a migraine if I don't follow a particular procedure when I detect these like the onset of it approaching. And I've learned like kind of meditative processes and things that I do and things to kind of avoid the triggers. To because once once it happens, like I guess it falls to a particular point, then that's it. You got a migraine and it's there. um, but you can avoid it. Like for me, it's like relaxing and taking my time and going slow, especially in the morning or something. Just take it easy and don't
Yeah.
worry. And that seems to help quite a bit. But there's a good example of like I mean, it was like physical effects that I had, like
Oh yeah.
pain, and like I felt like I was going to throw up and stuff, like just immediately hit me, just because my friend asked whether I was feeling okay. And then I was
See,
like, oh my God, I must be sick. And then actually was.
calling back to season 1, our episode on the connectome, there's still a lot about the brain we don't really understand. The mechanism for a psychosomatic effect like that, it, it it could be that our brain has the ability to tell the body where to create a problem.
Yeah.
Like what a weird glitch is that, right? Like and people forget that like stress is a hormonal response,
Yeah.
and hormones, cortisol, in the case of stress, hormones actually do bind to receptors and affect change in the body.
Yes.
Like
Absolutely.
that's how it happens, right?
Well,
Like, so
yeah.
if the brain tells cortisol where to go,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, my elbow must hurt,
Yep.
go to the elbow, make it hurt, like that could actually be happening.
Hmm.
behind the scenes, you know?
Well, and there's other chemicals in your body that like stress can release too, that have absolute physical effects, like
Mhm.
adrenaline and stuff.
Yep, yep.
Like that might be where panic attacks kind of originate. Like you get this like fight or flight thing, this thought in your head, and your body's like, oh my God, and reacts as if there's a real threat. And then
Yeah.
all it does is make that, creates a physical reaction. And then
Mhm.
you're now, swimming in it.
Yeah. I experience this sometimes when I get stressed where I'll suddenly get low blood sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And that's totally a stress thing, cortisol, adrenaline, things like that kick into action, increase metabolism, fight or flight, like you
Mm-hmm.
said. And of course, that uses up all your fuel. And
Yep.
then you're suddenly without fuel and you're like, oh, and they're like
Yep.
feeling like shit, like cold sweats and blah, 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 like shaking and
Yeah.
just like that weird feeling of being hungry, even though you're not hungry. And it's
Yep.
like, okay,
I
I gotta
know.
eat, but I don't want to. And
I know exactly what you're talking about.
yeah.
Well, and I mean, I guess in a way, all these uh, what this effect kind of tricks people into believing that these external forces do directly cause those sorts of things. But there's a middleman, and that's your perception, your mind.
Mm.
Like you, like it's kind of like when you look out into the grass and you see it moving. It's like, well, is it the wind or is it a tiger in the grass? Well, that's up to you to decide that. But if you believe that that it's a tiger, you're going to respond to that internally, like that your body chemistry is going to change and all that.
Be
Um,
the tiger, Arnie.
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, maybe, and like I said, with telling the story about my back and stuff like that, it's like all it took is for me to consciously redirect my thoughts
Mm.
to somewhere else. Actually, in this case, to nowhere. That improved immediately. Like it was like, oh, yep. I mean, I couldn't overcome the physical side of my muscles spasming uncontrollably, so that
Yeah,
was still a
yeah,
factor, but the pain completely like went away.
yeah. Meditation is a beautiful thing because
Yes.
it not only can do things like that, but like as a side effect of that, yeah, your mind is more clear, more focused to
Mm-hmm.
be able to say, why is my back spasming? Like, did I lift something too heavy? Did I not drink enough water today? Like, there might be a
Yeah.
way to like fix it. Oh, I need some ice. Oh, I need some water.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Clarity.
yeah. Whereas if you're just like, oh, fuck, it hurts so bad, like you're
Yeah.
not really like thinking, what do I do to fix this?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well, and yeah, and it works in not just physical situations, but life situations too. It's like, how many times have people been in some kind of sticky situation where they don't see a way out, right? And they just spin their wheels, just worrying all the time, like, how am I going to solve this problem? And never look to find solutions because they're so focused on the impossibility of whatever the situation is. Well, meditation can allow you to find those answers and solutions, by eliminating the force of your state of where you are.
mhm.
um Now you're free to explore and come up with answers. I mean, I do that all the time. I've been doing that since God, I was a little kid, since I got into meditation.
Yeah.
It really helps. It's like, you just need to stop and take a minute and ponder, like, again, like with clarity.
Yeah.
um, and then you can typically find a way out, or multiple pathways. There's always more than one way out. And that because what that does, like, it takes so much focus to maintain and hold that image, that all the other stuff that you're thinking about kind of just goes to the peripheral edges of your mind. And now all you have is this shape, and then from that point, then you have to actually bring the other thoughts back consciously for them to come back.
important rational thing to remember in that is that there probably is, as we've discussed in this episode, an actual, tangible, explainable, physiological reason for why that might work sometimes. It's not contingent on the universe or God or fate or destiny or, you know, all these like hand-waving things. It's all in your mind, even fits into that box. So like there are explanations. We just have to find them.